Hi guys, Jackie with Famished Farm, and we're back in the kitchen with our healthy recipe series. We're cooking with our meal planner, trying to stick to budget and use up ingredients in the house before they go bad. So why does a pretzel crusted chicken nugget salad from foodnetwork.com qualify as healthy? Well, it came up on their healthy tab, number one. Number two, this one uses pretzels, which is a unusual coating for a chicken nugget, and I just thought that combination would be really unique, and it turned out to be very delicious. Also, the dressing for the nuggets is a yogurt-based dressing, and it's salad. We've got plenty of greens coming out of the garden, so perfect timing for a delicious summer salad. This is very good. To prep this recipe, the three things we're going to need are pretzels that have been chopped finely, Parmesan cheese shredded, and our chicken cut into about 1-inch chunks. I would really recommend pulling out the food processor for this particular project. It, I think, would be worth the time savings. This did take a good 5 minutes to get these pretzels down to the size that I thought was appropriate for the breading. Okay, I just went back to look at the footage to make sure of the time, and it did take over 3 minutes to do, which seemed like forever. So if your food processor is handy, pull it out. I unfortunately had made dog food earlier in the day and had just cleaned my food processor and put it back away, so I didn't feel like pulling it out again and cleaning it again. I wish I had. Our wet ingredients are next. First is the mayonnaise, but guys, I found about 2 tablespoons of honey mustard dressing that I'm just going to add, and then you can add up to a 1/2 cup of mayonnaise. I did about a 1/4 cup. Dijon mustard, same thing, it calls for a 1/4 cup. I did about 2 tablespoons, and up to a 1/4 cup of Parmesan. It looks like I did probably about 3 tablespoons, maybe a little shy of that. Garlic powder, up to a teaspoon. Then salt and pepper to taste. We lightly salt. And mix these all thoroughly. The recipe calls for 1 pound of chicken breast. Feel free to substitute chicken thighs if that's what you have. I was lucky and meal prepped these before lunchtime, so they're ready to go. We're just going to mix those into the wet ingredients and give them a good stir. While the recipe has you cooking this in a 425-degree oven, I think this recipe would be a really good one to try the air fryer too. But because of my lack of air fryer skills, we are going to just bake this in the oven. So I preheated the oven, and here I have prepared my baking sheet with a rack. I'd suggest one a little taller than the one I used. There wasn't great airflow there. But you're simply going to pick those pieces of chicken up or use tongs, whatever you like. Just keep one hand dry, and then dredge them through the pretzels. This was a new bag of pretzels for us, so we didn't use the little bits down at the bottom of the bag that are real salty. If you are using the end of the bag, I would get rid of those little bits at the bottom of the bag. Don't include them in your breading. The reason I recommend a good rack that you're going to set these pretzel coated chicken nuggets on is ours came out really nice and crispy on the top side, but the bottom was not as crispy as it could have been. And this is probably for a couple reasons. I definitely overfilled this pan. It probably would have been better to have used 2 pans and 2 racks. I just used what I had though, so could have done it in 2 batches, which it's not going to happen in my house, but maybe it will happen in your house if you've got the patience. As we come to the bottom of this bowl of chicken, you'll notice there is still plenty of the coating, and that is with me using 1/2 of the mayonnaise, the Dijon mustard, and the grated Parmesan. So feel free to cut those ingredients in half. That'll be some calorie and fat savings for you. You'll also notice that I chose to only pour part of the pretzels on the plate during this whole coating process. And I don't know why I do that, but sometimes there is so much extra of whatever the dry coating is that you just end up throwing it away. And maybe I was hoping I could save these pretzel crumbs, which was ridiculous. You're not going to do that. But that's what I did. And as it turned out, I threw away a minimal, what I would consider a minimal amount of pretzel pieces. And here you go. That's what they look like before the oven. And into our 425-degree oven. Cooking time 12 to 18 minutes. The yogurt-based dressing for this turned out to be delicious, and it calls for a half a cup of plain Greek yogurt, which I use the full half a cup. If we have extra, which we end up having extra, I'm just going to throw it into my ranch dressing that I make, and it will just add to the flavor a bit. So to the Greek yogurt, we're going to add a couple tablespoons of Parmesan cheese, and then it calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil, which I'm going to leave out for now and taste it. A tablespoon of Dijon, a couple shakes of Worcestershire sauce, and then for me, a lot of ground pepper. And I do leave off the salt too until I taste it. I'm going to use just a touch of garlic powder instead of the clove grated, and I don't have a lemon, so I'm just going to use lemon juice out of the refrigerator. I don't know what happened to my lemons and limes this week. I'm going to give this a taste test after it's all mixed up. I decide it does not need the salt or the olive oil, but just a little bit of honey, and that's the diabetic in me speaking, so I add about a teaspoon of honey. Then mix that all up, taste test it again, make sure it's perfect for your taste buds, and then I throw this in the fridge until we're ready to use it. On to our salad ingredients. We're going to start with the radishes and the avocado. We're going to just thinly slice them any way you can. To cut this avocado, cut it in half up against the pit, remove the pit, and then being very careful with your sharp knife, very thinly slice it so it doesn't go through the skin. And then later I'll just use a big spoon to come in and take the slices out of the shell here. And then add your Parmesan. Cut back if you like. The recipe calls for kale. I'm just using the lettuce out of my garden. Calls for about 10 ounces. I'm gonna eyeball that, and I'm trying to get enough lettuce for dinner tonight. And if there's a little left for a salad tomorrow for lunch, great. And we're just gonna cut that into pieces or tear it into pieces, and then everything will be mixed up. Now, slow down here. Do not dump all of that dressing onto your lettuce or your kale because it will be one soggy mess. I ended up using about 2, maybe 3 tablespoons of dressing for this 10 ounces of lettuce, and it was plenty. You also, if you're not going to be eating right away, you might want to wait to cut the avocado till you're ready to serve the salad. We are going right from this stage right to the dinner table. So now is perfect to mix the salad and go ahead and dress the avocado on top. It looks good and it tastes better. And in the time that it takes to make the salad, you'll have time to clean up the kitchen before you need to pull the chicken tenders out, which look good too, don't they? This was really good, guys. You could use chicken breast or chicken thighs, any type of green that you want to use for the salad portion. And you could really cut back on the ingredients that are part of the dunking, the wet ingredients for dunking the chicken in before coating them in the pretzels. There was more than enough of that. So I would cut that portion in half, and I would cut the Parmesan cheese in half. And this actually becomes a very delicious, healthy, weekly rotation type of recipe. Enjoy it. Hey guys, So our second recipe is a coconut and lime pork kebab from foodnetwork.com. And this one was very good too. But why did I pick it? Based on healthy recipes? Basically pork tenderloin. If you do eat meat and red meat too, this is a very lean protein source. And it calls for 1.5 pounds. Next time I will just cut that in half and just use 1 pound. And then whatever leftovers go on our lunchtime salads. The other reason that we picked this is the coconut milk. That is an ingredient that I had in my cupboard that has kind of been languishing. I bought it for a recipe that I ended up not using. And so let's get that used up. Also, this has lime juice and sriracha, so could be on the spicy side for some people, but we cut that back just automatically just to make sure that it will work for our palate. So let's get cooking. We have our pork loin sitting there. That is a 2-pounder that I'm going to cut off a 1/4 pound of. But first I'm going to just get our garlic ready. And we are not huge garlic lovers, so it calls for 4 smashed cloves. I'm going to do 2 very small cloves smashed. So the recipe calls for 1.5 pounds. I am going to use my scale here and just try to get as close to 1/2 pound off of this pork loin, and I end up doing pretty good. This loin has been in my refrigerator, the meat drawer, for about a day, but it is still partially frozen. So this is going to just cut up beautifully with my steak knife, my favorite knife. No, I don't own another fancy knife. It's a long story, but I like this knife. This is what I cut with. So I'm just going to cut 1-inch slices, and then I'm going to cut each of those slices into either 6 pieces or 4 pieces, depending on if we're at one end or the other. Guys, feel free, if your pork loin is fatty or has a fat pad, feel free to trim that off before you do the chopping. Mine was fine, so I left it as is. And now we're going to continue with the recipe. We're going to add, this little bowl has a tablespoon of water. We're going to do both the marinade ingredients and the sauce ingredients at the same time. There's a dipping sauce we're making too. To the pork, we're going to add 1/2 can of this coconut milk, 2 tablespoons of whatever high temperature oil you like. This is going on the grill, so I'm using a vegetable oil. And then I'm reading the recipe. I see the next ingredient is the garlic that's already in there. And then we're going to add 1/3 cup of brown sugar to the marinade. And to our dipping sauce, we're going to put just 1 tablespoon of the brown sugar in with the water. And then we don't care for cilantro, so we're just going to use parsley. And we're going to put in 1 tablespoon into the pork mixture and another tablespoon into our dressing or our dipping sauce. Then we've got fish sauce, and that's going to be split also 1 tablespoon into each bowl. So 1 into the pork, 1 into the dipping sauce. And because the lemons and limes I bought this week are hidden from me at this time, I have to use my bottled lime juice, 1 tablespoon into each of our bowls. Next up we have sriracha. So sriracha is a chili sauce, so it can be hot for some people. We generally cut that in 1/3 or half. And in here I'm putting 1/2 tablespoon in each of the dishes, and it was perfect. It was delicious. So you guys up or down on the sriracha, just depending on what you like. Then I have grabbed my whisk for the little bowl, the sauce bowl, and we'll just get that all emulsified. We'll give it a taste test. It's delicious, perfect just the way it is. And we'll stir the same with our pork mixture, get that all nicely incorporated. We obviously don't taste that. And then a piece of saran on each one, and these both go into the fridge. Now, do not do what I do. I completely forgot about this dipping sauce when we went to eat this. It was delicious on its own, but that sauce is really good, so don't you guys forget it. You've seen me use this grill pan before. I'll put a link to it. It's excellent. We've used it for years. I've coated that with cooking spray, both the upper and the lower part. The detachable handle is off to the side. And we're just going to simply thread these pieces of pork onto the skewers. Now, I say it later, but this would be a great time to add any vegetables you want to grill too. Or how about some pineapple chunks in between each piece? That would be yummy, and that is what I'm going to do the next time we make this recipe, which will be in a week or two. Oh guys, you don't even have to use the basket if you don't mind flipping the skewers on the grill, or put 2 skewers in each one to make it easier to flip. This just with the basket makes it so easy to flip your skewers once they get on the grill. Do you? So these went onto the grill. Rod ended up doing these about 14 minutes. They could have been on there a little longer, a little more of the nice char marks. This coconut lime pork kebab was excellent. We put it on the grill for about 18 minutes to get everything done, and we both said while we were eating, the only thing that would have made it more delicious was having grilled pineapple with it. So if you're gonna make this, buy a fresh pineapple and cube it up. Put a pineapple cube between each of your pork cubes, and this will be absolutely delicious. Now, I also made a wild rice side dish to go with it, and I will link that recipe in the description. Turned out delicious. I wouldn't change a thing about this meal, and we will definitely have it on repeat. It was excellent. Hey guys, our last recipe, and I hope you're enjoying these recipes. If you are, please consider subscribing and put a link to your favorite healthy recipe in the comments down below, because I'm trying to increase my healthy recipes. But our final recipe is garlic Parmesan chicken and potatoes. Now, this one calls for Buffalo Wild Wings Parmesan garlic sauce. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that I am not a huge garlic person, so I was kind of worried about how garlicky this would be. And also potatoes in the recipe, not typically a health food, but you're trying to get recipes that are gonna last forever, that they're gonna be part of your family favorites and be in the weekly rotation. So how I do that is I use less than the recipe calls for of those, dicey ingredients. So we just use 1 large potato instead of the 4 or 5 small ones. It actually called for 4 to 5 small to medium potatoes. So I feel like we kind of cut the potatoes that way. And I used a lot less wing sauce than probably most people do. It also called for a cup of mozzarella cheese. Easily you could leave that off. We did have pepper jack cheese, and I put about a half a cup on to melt. The recipe was really good. Rod ate, I swear, 2.5 servings of this. Now, this is from cookinginthemidwest.com. Look at the recipe, you judge it if it's going to be healthy for your household. And hopefully, if you have any comments on how to lighten anything up that I make, please let me know in the comments. It's been fun cooking with you this week. Come back next week and we'll find some more new recipes to go through. Thanks. This is our russet potato. I'm going to knock off a little bad spot there on the end. And then I'm simply going to slice this into roughly 1/2-inch slices. And then I'm going to cube it from there. And again, I am making this lower carb for me, being a diabetic. So you do you. If you like potatoes, add as many as you like. The recipe author does not give measurements for this part of the recipe. So I start out with about a tablespoon of olive oil, and then you're going to add some garlic powder, I would suggest around a half a teaspoon. I use probably a little less than that. This is probably more like a quarter teaspoon. Then some paprika, go for a half a teaspoon. Then I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of onion powder and a few shakes of pepper and salt. Now you guys, we salt light, you do you. Then I'm just going to use my hands to mix this up. And as I'm mixing, I kind of decide that maybe it needs another tablespoon of olive oil. Did I say this is going to go into the air fryer? Well, it is. And I'm not an air fryer expert by any stretch. So 2 tablespoons may be too much. I'm not positive. You guys let me know in the comments. And my air fryer has trays, so it came with this rotisserie attachment basket that I have to figure out now how to use. I don't know if I've ever used this before. So I'm going to set the potatoes to the side while I work on the chicken. Now I'm just working with a pre-packaged up bag of chicken breast. This is roughly 1.5 chicken breast. And this is very thawed, so I'm just going to cut this with scissors. Again, guys, you use whatever knife of your choice. Use your favorite utensil. I don't care. Do you? I'm using scissors. I just find that easier with especially thawed meat. As I'm cutting this with my kitchen shears, I am wondering if it is time to either sharpen these or get a new pair, because several times they just seem kind of dull. She doesn't specify what size cubes to cut these into. These are, I would say, bite-sized chunks. They do kind of shrink a bit as you cook them. It's really unfortunate, but the previous 8 minutes of footage I had to delete. It was basically me trying to figure out how to use the air fryer rotisserie basket. So that was a disaster, but about 8 minutes of footage is gone. So anyway, we're back at the chicken. We're now going to season the chicken, and we're going to use salt and pepper. Pretty much, she calls for half a teaspoon of salt and pepper, then a teaspoon of paprika, onion powder, which I'm going to have to get another one opened here. And then eventually I'll add a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. She also calls for 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. I didn't have the energy to do that, so I just add about a quarter teaspoon of dry garlic. And then here comes the Italian seasoning. And then we're pretty much ready to mix this up. And just to be clear, we are not huge garlic fans. And because the sauce is a Buffalo Wild Wings garlic Parmesan sauce, we just didn't feel it would need that extra garlic. I apologize, my camera is going to have some funky angles here coming up. But we're going to move over to the skillet now, the stove top, and I've got my favorite nonstick wok, and it calls for 2 tablespoons of butter, which I'm just going to put a tablespoon in. And easily, guys, you could just use the nonstick skillet without the butter, but it does add some flavor. We're going to let that melt, and then we're going to cook this chicken on the skillet over medium-high heat until it's done. And did I mention that the air fryer is going 20 minutes at 400 degrees? We've got it all preheated, and it's over there cooking. You can probably hear that in the background. This is an area you could lighten up the recipe. It calls for 1 cup of shredded mozzarella. I'm going to do about a half a cup of pepper jack. That's what I have. You could easily leave this out. With the sauce, there's enough flavor without it. Then we're going to move back over to the stove top to flip over this chicken, which has got some great color. I just let it sit, let it brown up a little bit. And then it does take takes a little bit of time. You're either going to have to stand here and stir it to make sure that all these pieces get equal time on the other side, or I kind of piece by piece, the ones that didn't flip over, I try to flip them over so they get nice color on both sides. These kind of things to me are tedious little things, but in the long run, it just gives you so much more flavor and color if you take the time to do this. But if you're in a hurry, I would cook this if it was white and cooked, opaque, let's say, and cooked on one side. I would flip it and without thinking about it to give it a chance to cook on the other side if you're in a hurry. If not, take the time and do this. It's worth it. So now I'm flipping this one last time, and then I'm just going to grab the lid for the wok and let the temperature go down. You could turn it off. In my case, I turned it off, but just let this chicken kind of steam. Okay, I've kind of cleaned up the kitchen. The chicken's ready, and now the air fryer is about to beep, and I have to figure out how to remove this basket. It seems like it should come with some kind of handle for this basket, but it doesn't. So I use a spatula, a metal spatula, because obviously you're not going to reach in there and pull it out. And this actually works just quite well to pull this out of there. Again, air fryer, not my favorite appliance, but once I get it out of there, I am going to open this little rotisserie basket and check it out and make sure that the potatoes are cooked. And they are nice and crispy. Now back over to our chicken. I have drained this chicken. Once I took the lid off, there was a bunch of liquid in it, so I drained that off. And now I'm going to add, I would say we did not add a 1/4 cup of this. If we added 3 tablespoons, possibly, and that was plenty to flavor these pieces of chicken. And again, I am not a huge garlic person, neither is Rod. So this was plenty of sauce just for consistency and for taste for us. And then we're going to add our crispy potatoes. Give it a stir. And basically at this point you could eat, but it does call for a cup of mozzarella. Again, we cut that in half and we used pepper jack just because it's what we had on hand. At this point, she recommends popping this in the oven and broiling it to melt the cheese because this is not an oven-safe skillet and because it's summertime and I don't want the heat. I'm just going to put that lid back on it just for a couple minutes till we're ready to eat. We added green beans, but you could add a salad or any other light side dish and delicious, delicious. Thanks for being here. Come back next week and we'll find some more new recipes that we can make healthy and that can become part of our weekly rotation.